business idea which are connected closely with the society and provide culture, social solutions. They do not measure their profit or a success by a usual metrics like revenue generation or rises in the stock prices of the organization. They esteem their profit based on the changes they made in the society or the environment to enrich our knowledge. On this interesting topic, social entrepreneurship, today Dr. Rajib Shah is with us. I request our IIT President, Assistant Professor in Commerce of a college, Dr. Malavini, to welcome the guests of the gathering and to introduce the eminent speaker to the audience.
Thank you, Bhuvana. At the outset, I heartily thank Dr. Rajiv Shah, Professor and Director, India-Japan Laboratory, Keio University, Japan, for having accepted our invitation to address our students on the topic social entrepreneurship. I am privileged to introduce Dr. Rajiv Shah to the participants of today's international webinar. Dr. Rajiv, a Japanese national of Indian origin, is a professor in Graduate School of Media and Governance in Keio University, Japan. He is a distinguished professor at IIT Guwahati, India, and Sichuan Universities, China. He is also the senior fellow of Institute of Global Environmental Strategies, Japan, and chairperson of two Japanese NGOs, Seeds Asia and CWS Japan. His expertise include community-based risk management, climate change adaptation, urban risk management, and disaster and environmental education. He is the editor of a book series on disaster risk reduction published by Springer. He has published 6 books, more than 400 academic papers and book chapters. Professor Rajiv is a recipient of several prestigious awards, such as the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award in 2021, which is the highest honor conferred on overseas Indians by Government of India, and also United Nations Sasakawa Award for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2022 by United Nations Organization, Noryu Okada Implementation Science Award 2022 by the International Society for Integrated Disaster Risk Management. He is the co-founder of Delhi-based social entrepreneur startup RICA, Resilience Innovation Knowledge Academy, and also RICA Institute, a non-profit wing of RICA. We are indeed greatly honored by your presence today, sir. I'm happy to welcome you, sir. I now take great pleasure to welcome Mrs. R. Rajalakshmi, Associate Professor and Head, Postgraduate and Research Department of Commerce and Dean of Academics, CTTE College for Women. Madam is having 37 years of teaching experience and is heading the department for the same number of years in our college. She is the pillar of strength and support for all the activities of the college. I heartily thank you for your patronage, ma'am. I heartily welcome you, madam. I'm happy to welcome the IAC team of faculty members who always stand in unison in all the activities of the council. I extend a hearty welcome to all the students present here for whose benefit this event is being organized. I once again welcome you all to this international webinar on social entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. May I now request Mrs. R. Rajalakshmi, Associate Professor, Head of PT and Research Department, Department of Commerce, Dean of Academics of College, to offer a felicitation.
Good morning to all of you gathered here, both online and offline. I extend my warm welcome to our speaker, Dr. Rajiv Shah, Professor and Professor and Director, Kyoto University, Japan, who, in spite of his busy schedule, is present with us to share his valuable ideas, thoughts, and experiences among the audience of today's international webinar on social entrepreneurship. The concept of social entrepreneurship is not a novel idea. This dates back to 1700th century, but in the year 2000, it became more popular among societal members and attracted the attention of academic researchers too. As a result, Many individuals, business houses, and non-profit organizations started stepping into this activity and bring about a positive change in the world. The social entrepreneurship is a broad term and needs a very wide heart. Some social entrepreneurs think high high and work with an objective of solving the global issues such as overpopulation, food shortages, disaster management, environmental conservation, etc. For theoretical purpose, we can classify the social entrepreneurship into four heads. Community social entrepreneurs, they deliver this service on a small scale. That is to the smaller section of the society with their funds, with their own funds. Non-profit entrepreneurs with the available fund from voluntary organizations and sponsors, they serve the community. Transformational entrepreneurs interested in fulfilling the needs not fulfilled or touched by the government or other business houses. Global social entrepreneurs, they extend help across the borders. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation example can be given. Based on the above mentioned information, it can be stated that availability of funds is not the criterion. Our former President ABJ Abdul Kalam has given the following quote: thinking is a capital, enterprise is a way, hard work is a solution. So I firmly say that reaching out to the needy at the right time is a basic underlining factor for social entrepreneurship. At this juncture, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to CFSD, an entrepreneurial cell of the college, especially to Dr. P. Mallarvi, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, and President of IIC of this college, for bringing a right speaker to the right audience. Once again, I extend my warm welcome to everyone and request the audience to convert the theoretical inputs into social outputs. Thank you. Once again, I welcome everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. May I now request our chief guest, Dr. Rajiv Shah, Professor, Director, Indian Japan Laboratory, Kyoto University, Japan, to take over the session.
Thank you very much, and a very good morning to all of you, our esteemed faculty members, dear students, and all who are present there. I see in one of the screenshot that there are quite a bit of students who are there, and also some of you who are joining online. It's an honor and privilege for me to spend some time with you. As I was introduced, I have a few hats, of course. My main position is in academia, but I also work very closely with national and local governments, especially with the United Nations, chairing their Science Technology Advisory Group, and also IPCC, which is the climate change. Some of you might be knowing that the science policy interface. And also I have a startup based in Delhi and mainly focusing on the different types of social entrepreneurship. And also I chair the board of two Japanese NPO. Why I'm explaining this one is today's topic, the science, technology, innovation in disaster risk reduction, especially the importance of the social innovation and entrepreneurship. This cannot be achieved possibly just only being in the university or being an academician. It needs synergy of different types of attempts. And I try to learn from all my other hats. When I work on the science policy interface, when I work with the startup and innovation, when I work with the grassroots innovations through the NGO and NPO. So I'd like to share some of the reflections on that. Next slide, please. This will be my overall contents today. Before I go, go to the next slide. Yeah. So before I go to the actual topic, I would like to explain a little bit what we do in Keio University, our India-Japan lab, and then I will put a few context and then social innovation and entrepreneurship. Next slide, please. Okay, Keio University, maybe many of you are possibly may not be aware about this university. This is the oldest university in Japan that was formed back in 1858. And before the major universities like the Tokyo or Kyoto were formed. This is a private university, and this was very interesting that in those days, back in mid 1800, we had more the Oriental education, which is more the Chinese influenced education, but then there was our founder Yukiichi Fukuzawa. He was one of the very few Japanese who had seen both the Western education, the European one, as well as the American education. So he wanted to make this blending, and that's how our university came in. So there is a long history of around 170 years, close to 170 years in our university. The next one, please. Next slide. We have 10 undergraduate faculties and 14 graduate students. And so we have also a medical, like hospital, as well as the medical faculty. I belong to this policy management, which is the undergraduate faculty, as well as the media and governance, which is a graduate school. And this is very interesting that while most of the national universities, so-called the government university. Now, actually, there is no government university. These are all independent university administration in Japan. But most of the so-called government or national universities, they have almost 70% focus on the science and technology. But in our case, I think it's the opposite. 70% focus more on social issues, more like the economics or law or business and commerce and so on, and 30% on the science and technology. Next slide, please. I actually happen to be in Kyoto University, which is also a very reputed university in Japan. And we often say that the Kyoto University, I spent there 13 years, and now I'm here in KO for last 6 years. And we always say that Kyoto University produced largest number of Nobel laureates. We had around 9 Nobel laureates. Then Tokyo University produced largest number of prime ministers and bureaucrats. And our university, KO, produced largest number of company CEOs, the company president. So any major brand name in Japan, whether it is the Toyota or Kirin or the Apple, IBM, Japan, or the Japan Airlines, All Nippon Airways, and so they are presidents usually come from KO. Why I'm telling that is that from the very beginning, like we have our entrepreneurship in developed in the curriculum, and like it's a mindset, I will say, that even my undergraduate student, after their undergraduate, when they pass out, so they don't want to just join a company as a like as a staff. Rather, many of them, they want to start their own companies and so on. So this entrepreneurship mindset is very, very important. I'm still learning about this. Hope I can share some of my observations in due course. Next slide, please. In this university, to foster more this India-Japan collaboration, we have developed this India-Japan laboratory. You can have if you are interested, you can have a look at this, our website. It's semindiajapanlab.org. Next slide, please. We started this in 2019, and then we had these three major pillars. Maybe a little bit difficult for you to see what is written there, but the middle pillar is more on the different types of technology, like all the new and emerging technology, whether it is AI or drones or data science or IoT and so on. The left-hand side, which I belong to, which is on the environment, sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and so on. And right-hand side is also very important on this India-Japan collaboration, which is the culture, yoga, art, music, and so on. And we try to do lots of cross-cutting collaboration, research, education, then lots of private sector or entrepreneurship development. Next slide, please. We did this, I won't go into the detail of it, but it started in 2019, this India-Japan lab, and in December, and then, of course, you can imagine that from 2020, we had experienced the COVID-19, so we had to actually change some of our work online. So I will just give you a couple of examples how we did so far. Next slide, please. This is I will come. I will come in due course that what are the work which we are working. But before going to that, let me put a few context that some of you are possibly aware that this 2015 was a very landmark year because there are this all the global frameworks which came in. One of the very famous one is the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal, which possibly brings many development paradigms, different development perspective together. Then also in 2015, we had the Paris Agreement on climate change. And then maybe a little bit less known framework, which is called Sendai framework, which is on the disasters. So there are three major frameworks, one on development, one on climate change, one on disaster. And that's how we call this, this is a very global framework. And the interesting part of this is that while it is a global framework, this importance of the local has been very, very strong. And importance of the local means like, if you go to the next slide, so importance of the local is like we try to analyze like how this particular framework, these three frameworks talks about local. So you can see that the term, this local, has been used quite significantly in all the different frameworks, and how these are used in terms of local community, local culture, local businesses, local tradition, local adaptation, local governance, and so on. So what is important here that while we are talking about the larger perspective or the global perspective on the development, climate change, environment, and disasters, but its actual implementation starts at the local level. And so it is very important that when we do lots of social entrepreneurship or lots of local issues, addressing the local issues, by trying solving some of these local issues, you can really contribute to the global framework. And that's the main message which we got it from our this particular analysis. Next slide, please. Then let me give you a little bit on this global risk landscape. Some of you, I'm not sure whether you are aware about this, that every year in January, there is this World Economic Forum, which is known as Davos meeting. So it's in Davos in Switzerland. And usually the head of the states, then the Nobel laureates, then the company CEOs, they present there and they try to discuss on different aspects. And this World Economic Forum, they publish the risk outlook. They call the global risk outlook every year in January. It's usually in the middle of January. And this, so this, say for example, this year also it was published in January. So 2023 is the analysis of the previous year, how the global risk landscape changes. So this is 2020. So this was the analysis of the 2019. And there are many different boxes and the color coding. The interesting thing is that this was World Economic Forum. So of course they try to understand the economic risk, but then, so that is the blue one. But if you see that in the more it started from 2007, but more we see, more we move towards the recent years, the environmental risk, the green color, becomes very prominent, both in terms of likelihood and impact. And what are those green colors? So this is like the disaster, then climate change issue, extreme weather, biodiversity losses, and so on. So the important part here, the main message here, that when we try to talk about the economic risk is no more isolated as an economic aspect. This is linked to the green one, which is the environmental risk, sometimes global geopolitical risk, sometimes the technological risk, and so on. So these different types of risk, the interplay, actually, we need to keep in mind. Next slide, please. In 2021 was the analysis of year 2020. And that time we had already experienced COVID-19. So infectious disease becomes one of the major risks which has a major impact. But there are two new risks which came in terms of likelihood. These are the digital power concentration and the digital inequality. So many of you, like what we are doing in Zoom, many of you possibly will remember that in 2020, we have changed quite a bit our working mode, our education mode, our different types of service providing mode into digital and the online system. We are possibly privileged to have the online connectivity, but possibly not everyone has that. Even, say, for example, developed and developing country, there are quite a bit of barrier. Within the same country, maybe urban area has the digital connectivity, rural area may not have that much. Even, say, for example, what is happening in Japan, say, for example, the younger generation, they are more tuned to the digital connectivity, but the elder generation who are possibly 80s, 80-year-old, 85-year-old, they are possibly not that tuned to the digital connectivity. So there has been a digital divide, and this is possibly becoming a major risk for the future unless we make it proper way to bring this digital inclusivity, what we call. Next slide, please. This is 2022 last year report. So in terms of all 2 years of COVID-19, you see that the cyber security, digital inequality, these becomes the major risk for the future. And if you think about the 10 years, next 10 years, again, the different types of green one, which are the environmental risk, whether it is disaster, climate change, biodiversity losses, and so on, that still remains very high. Next slide, please. So this year report. So this year report, what does it say? Is that the quality of life and the food pricing becomes one of the major challenge in this year. And what is many of you possibly will understand the reason that this is due to the energy is one of the major challenge, like because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And then if you go to the next slide, so there will be the cost of living is one of the major challenge identified. Next slide, please. Cost of living is one of the major risk identified for next 2 years and so on. But then, yes, so what I'm trying to talking about, that if you see that from 2020 onward, there has been only within these 3 years, there have been lots of different types of changes. We have seen the environmental risk becoming prominent. Then we had COVID-19, which is an infectious disease. Then we had, due to COVID-19, this digital inequality or digital divide has expanded. And now what we have also, we had still COVID-19 is ongoing. But then last year we have seen this major war which broke down and which has major problem on the energy security, the food security in many places. So this whole global landscape, risk landscape is changing, but in spite of that, again, I focus on this green color. If you think about the next 10 years, what are the major risks? So we need to really focus on the disasters, climate change, environmental degradations, and so on. So lots of new, why I'm again trying to spend a little bit of more time on emphasizing this issue, that still the social innovation is still very, very lacking in this particular field. But these topics becoming very, very important, not only for one country, in many countries. And now you know that India is now the president of G20, that there are many different types of media reports. And India has actually started a new working group on disaster risk reduction under the G20 Sherpa track. And then recently with the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, I wrote a paper on how India should be working on this G20, especially on the disaster risk reduction. So we need lots of new social innovations in this type of field. Next slide, please. So another important thing is this whole digital issue. These are, if you see that the internet user, of course, in Asia has the largest internet user, with China and India the largest population. But before I saw this particular data analysis, I was not sure that it's almost cover 60% of the global internet users. Actually, it's focusing on India in Asia. So in Asia, of course, in one way, the digital connectivity is very high. But if you see the next slide, please, the global gap between urban and rural area, the blue one is the urban and the orange one is the rural. So urban is increasing, rural is also increasing. But you will see that this gap of around 20-25% of the population, that almost remained same even last 10 years. And that is a major problem where, again, lots of new social innovation and social entrepreneurship is required, like how we bring different types of services to the most needy people. Yes, we are again the privileged one to live in the urban area, in the cities with a good digital connectivity. But ultimately, possibly the rural innovation is the real need of the hour, and how we bring different types of rural innovation as well as the climate disasters or different types of risk, which I mentioned together. So I think these two actually keeps us lots of new challenges, and of course, more we have the challenges, and I'm always quite confident that more we have challenges, more new innovations are actually born due to to address different types of challenges. Next slide, please. So to reduce this gap, this is one example in Japan, like how Japan is actually focusing on. Like in Japan, this is called digital denen toshi. So this is denen toshi means toshi is the urban area, and den is more like the surrounding rural area. So in Japan also it is the same thing, like more people who are coming from the rural area they are moving to the urban area. So who are remaining in the rural areas are possibly the aged populations and they who does the agriculture, but then again they are possibly not in a physical state to do the agriculture, and there are always this digital gap which remains. So there are three specific focus. One is the sustainability on the left hand side, then well-being and innovation. So these three, how this type of three things can actually help. So this is a new, very new, last year with our new Prime Minister Kishida, and he started this regional revitalization through digitalization, and furthermore to realize bottom-up growth from the regions to the entire country. And this is, I think, the essence of social innovation in Japan, because in Japan, when we talk about the innovation, it is more the technological innovations which most of the people are focusing. But the social innovation, which possibly many of you are doing in India, I always say, and that's also one of our target in this India-Japan lab, that how the both countries can actually learn from each other. Of course, there are lots of new technologies, lots of new infrastructure management system, which Japan has. Now, like in India, we have the Made in India movement, which is going on in many states, also in the nationwide. As you know, that the Made in Japan is also a brand which has been created. So if anything is made in Japan is equivalent to the quality of that particular product. And that quality is not done just only by one way. So it is a very, very, in Japanese, we use a word called Kaizen, Kaizen. If you want, you can actually Google this, which is like a PDCA cycle, that which is time and again you go through this process and try to find a mistake and then try to rectify the mistake in the next phase. So this is a sort of Kaizen principles which we do in the manufacturing sector, and that actually bought this Made in Japan brand. And that's possibly India can learn quite a bit on that whole process and the quality management system. But on the contrary, I think that Japan can learn quite a bit from India on this essence of the social innovations and the social entrepreneurship. And this is again to bridge this gap of urban and rural innovation requirements in Japan. So that's one of the major trends which is happening in Japan. Next slide, please. So now there are a few policy gaps, which is I'm coming back again to the disasters issues. So with this is an UN analysis which we did in a few countries. Like when you talk about the science technology in the disaster risk reduction, what are the major gaps and so on. So there are three major pillars. One is science technology in the decision making, investment, and connectivity to the people. So if you see the numbers, can you bring the slide a little bit up? Yes. So if you see the number, so you will see that this is the scoring which we did, and in all the countries it was done by a group of people from the government, from the science technology academia, and from the civil society. So the cumulative one is, of course, the China was the highest because they had a very strong investment in in the decision making as well as in the science technology investment. But they were relatively poor in this link of this science technology into the link science technology to the people. But if you see this example of Indonesia, Indonesia is possibly a very classic example where they had a very balanced one. One is 68 here, 77 here, and 69 here. Japan was like 85, 73, 69, and India was 70, 53, 57. India's part is also quite balanced here, but possibly we need a little bit of more investment in the science technology for disaster risk. So what does it say is that we can always make lots of science technology in investment in the universities, in the research institutions. But unless this innovation are linked to the people, which is this third part, I think many of these are just only remains as academic publications or academic papers and so on. So the essence and need of the social innovation is that how we can link this people's connectivity part. And they are possibly, it's not what a scientist need to invent, it's rather where there is a demand of invention. And to understand that, I always tell my students also that don't make your research problem sitting in the laboratory or sitting in the university. Go to the field, talk to the people, try to understand what are the needs and demands. Possibly we cannot solve each and every problem together, but at least even if it is a small one problem which is attached to the community, that really makes a big difference. And that's the whole essence of the social innovations, where the innovation is linked to the actual problem in the field. And it's not that we design it or we develop, it's more the co-designing with the community, then co-developing with the community, and co-delivering with the community. So co-design, co-develop, and co-delivery with the communities, as well as possibly some of the non-profit, non-government organizations or the community-based organizations together. And that's, again, very important lessons of the social innovations which is required. Next slide, please. So I would like to give a couple of examples here. Like, say, for example, the citizen science, many of you are possibly aware about this, but citizen science, this is a very, citizen science is quite a bit, quite common in the field of biology or in the field of different types of biodiversity. But here, this was a work which we did in Varanasi in India with some of the Japanese company called Fujitsu, and where we try to understand that how we engage the citizen for understanding the different types of flood in different parts of the city. As you will possibly also remember, there were several flooding incidents in Chennai and in some parts of Tamil Nadu also over the past few years. But it's not the flooding that, of course, in a catastrophic flood, the whole city comes underwater. But usually what happens is that when the rain comes and possibly some areas got flooded very highly, some areas are possibly not that much flooded. And it is very much depending on the sewage and the drainage system of that particular area. So what we try to do is that here we developed a very simple smartphone technology, and which based on the augmented reality AR, and then where you actually take a photo of the, say for example, a tire. A tire can be a two-wheeler or can be a bus or truck, or even can be a auto rickshaw, or even can be a car. And depending on, so we have already, we know the diameter of the tire, and if you take the photo that how much part of that inundation is there, and then it will automatically give the calculation of the inundation level, and then with your GPS location it will be uploaded in the Google map, and that will give you the idea that which part of the city is under how much of depth. And this was actually done again with some of the entrepreneur, they are very young entrepreneurs who are based in Varanasi. So they mobilized actually quite a bit of group in Varanasi, youth group. Sometimes also they involve some of the university students, the school students and so on, to make it more the crowdsourcing so that the data becomes very high. And then the ultimate thing is that in some part of the Google map, you will see different color coding. So like the red one means more than 60 centimeter, yellow one is between 60 to 50 centimeter, or blue one is less than 50 centimeter. And accordingly, it will actually help in diverting the traffic. So this was one of the examples that how a very simple innovation can, when it's linked to the communities, can actually help to solve some of the real problem. Next slide, please. Some of the other innovations I will give you, like say for example, this is the water usage, and this is an app which we developed for the urban water purposes. And again, these are the work of some of our students here, and they were like very, very young entrepreneur. And what they did is that, you know, that in most of the places in Japan, there are the water meters. So you know, in the urban area, when we actually use the water, we are not measuring that how much water we are using. So it's very much related because our lifestyle is changing. So the water usage is changing, but our dependency on water. Earlier in the old days, people used to bring and go and fetch the water, but now we just use the water pipeline and we pay that water tax for that, the amount of the water which we use. So our attachment with water is actually gradually becoming very, very low. And this was a very simple tool, like how we can actually engage ourselves to make us more accustomed or learn that water is a very important, it's a common property with everyone, and we need to be very careful of that. So there, this app has a very simple, like the inputs, like your family member, what is, and then whether you want to be the best water user, good water user, or an average water user. Accordingly, there are per day, per capita water, the how much liter. So there is a calculation for that. And then So there will be an automatic alarm. So you set your weekly target, and there will be an automatic alarm which comes to your smartphone that, okay, you have already used 70% of your target for this week. So this is again like you, then possibly it will be like next, when you have this alarm, and then when you are taking a shower, possibly you will be a little bit more aware that, oh, I need to be a little bit careful about the water usage. So these are, and also in our recent book on the urban drought, we actually provided some of these examples on the water solutions. So these are again some of the very simple innovations which are required for the water solutions. The next one, please. And this is something on the heat resistant paint. So this was more like a larger innovation which one of the major company here called Tej indeed, and they were like using some sort of very good paint, and which actually makes the surface temperature around the changes were 13 to 15 degree, and I could not believe actually when I first saw their data, but then we did the experiment and we found really it's a big difference, and it has again a major consequence of energy saving. Some of the buses or even now some of the cars are also using that one, so that you use less air condition, and that has an impact on the energy saving and so on. So this we are using in the larger commercial building or even the public buildings like the schools, which has a very big roof. And in India also, we have been collaborating with some of the private school, try to engage them into different types of activities, and to make it more cost effective, energy saving. And my last example here, next slide, please, is on again on the water's usage. So this is a small startup. I worked with them very closely. This name is Water, WOTA, and this is AI-based water solution. Means AI-based more on the water purification. So this is one sort of cylinder type of thing, and you can do where there is 20 liter of water, and you can keep on hand washing with this 20 liter, because it's actually recycle, and this recycling is done by the AI. And this was very effective during the COVID, and now we often see this type of water this wash, WOSH, this one, this particular model we often see in many supermarket, even in the department store or even the stations and so on. And so the main issue again is these were all started with different types of problems rooted in the local conditions, and then this whole innovations actually came with the local communities needs, the local government needs, and also their affordability, because ultimately we can always make the good innovations, but if it's not affordable by the people, I think this whole concept of social innovation does not come into existence. Next one, please. So in this Keio University's India Japan laboratory, we did the work we call the Social Innovation Online Hackathon. So this was we did with including Keio. There were 5 universities, 2 IITs, 2 NITs, and there were 13 different discipline students, almost 46 students. They were divided into 6 SDGs group. And then we had quite a bit of strong mentoring, and this mentoring we requested several people from Japanese Business Federation as well as FICCI. FICCI is the Indian Business Federation. So several of our colleagues from there, they actually give the mentoring thing, and then finally there were three specific ideas which have been chosen, and then we funded those ideas. So next slide, please. So this is again like it was possible only, you can see the details in the website which is given here. But this was like again the importance of this youth involvement, and so they made say for example some very interesting app which is good for this fresh cart, which was more for the vegetable selling. Then there are some another methods which were applied for different types of time management during the hospital, so that it doesn't become more crowded and so on. So there were a few ideas which were actually provided, and then we were tested it, and then finally we provided some little bit of funding to make that actual prototype happen. Again, these are very simple ideas of the social innovation, which came from the student, but again, we need to think about also the market of the social innovations, like how feasible is the market, or whether it can actually go for over a longer period of time. And for that, we had this lots of support from our these business federations, and they were doing lots of mentoring. The next slide, please. So this was a work which we did with Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and they are again some social innovation idea. So the one which I showed earlier, it was more on actually developing the social innovation solutions, and this were more the which were already tested. And so there were an open call, and we got a huge entry, around 550 team across India. They registered, then 175 proposals, and then there were different types of proof. And then again, we did it for 4 specific SDG. One was on the water solutions, one was more on the agriculture and food production, another one on the women empowerment, and another one on the health. So there are 4 specific areas, and then there are quite a bit of screening, and then there were top 3 prizes. So this compilation, we made the whole compilation, and again, this compilation is available in this website, which is mentioned here. So again, the point here is that there are already lots of social innovations which are happening. Some of them are tested, some of them have proper proof, some of them are possibly in different types of idea stages. So we need to bring them together. But again, my earlier point, which I mentioned, that the SDGs, climate change, disaster risk reduction, environmental management are possibly the areas where there are lots of future needs of social innovation. Next slide, please. So after seeing all these things, so we started this one, which is we call the science-based entrepreneurship. And this is the startup which we did called Resilience Innovation Knowledge Academy. And you can see more with this one. And then trying to this is more on the youth and young professional. And we call them the science-preneurship, which is more on the science-based entrepreneurship. And again, the science is not for generating science, but bringing science into entrepreneur mindset. And I think I'm almost at the end of my talk. The next slide. So this actually is to link between this private sector and policy. So between science, technology, and the private sector. So through research, innovation, and knowledge. And there is very important thing is this incubation. I think incubation and mentorship is very important. There are many universities who have started their incubation centers. We are actually working with some of them. And these incubations are mostly different disciplines. They come together and providing different types of new ideas, but again, not all the ideas are good enough, and possibly some of the ideas need to be matured and mentored and so on. And final couple of slides about in Japan. Once again, I go. So next slide, please. So as you know that in Japan there are this concept of the society 5.0, which is the futuristic society. And why 5.0 is 1.0 was the hunting, 2.0 was agriculture, 3.0 was industry, 4.0 is the society where we are currently, which is the information age, and 5.0 is the one where we will be going next. This is very similar to the industry 4.0 in Europe, but society 5.0 has a very strong dimension of human, which we call the people-centric, technology-driven society. Next slide, please. In this um, in this area where we have like lots of use of the big data or the artificial intelligence, and but there are three different issues. One is the high quality life, vitality, and comfort, bringing them together. And but the important part is again like the it's not just the technology innovations we are talking about, the social innovations, and possibly they are again my strong hope is that possibly only Japanese students cannot do this type of social innovations together by themselves. So there we possibly need more collaboration with Indian students and jointly together, because I think that two of our countries students, they have different types of mindset because they have different types of basic education systems. So I strongly believe that the Indian students are more strongly more ahead in the social entrepreneurship, and while possibly Japanese students, what I see them are possibly sometimes more ahead in terms of different types of technological innovation. So bringing this technological innovation and the social entrepreneur mindset together, I think that can possibly make a big difference. And that's actually our hope for this India Japan lab. And what we are trying to do is try to give bridge that one. So I think I almost end my presentation. I think couple of next slides are mainly our books. We recently wrote a couple of books on this emerging technology as well as the society 5.0 and digital transformation, and gave some of the examples. So yep, the final slides are only the keywords. I don't go for any conclusion. So some of the keywords which I possibly leave with you. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to get any questions or comments.
Sir, we are really fortunate to have you amidst us today. This webinar on social entrepreneurship is really a great value addition to our current semester courses on entrepreneurship development. Once again, thank you, sir. Now it's for interaction with the chief guest. The session is open for the audience to clear their queries with Dr. Rajiv Shah.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Sir, please share your experience as social entrepreneur, sir.
Say again.
Sir, please share your experience as a social entrepreneur.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I think some of the experience which I shared, say for example, our work with Varanasi, this youth group, or the work which we did in this social online hackathon. So these are possibly some of them. And this was mainly for how you can make the fresh vegetable available with the. Okay, let me give a little bit elaboration on this. The work which we did with the social innovation online hackathon. So there they came out with some idea about making some specific system where you have more connectivity with the food product which you are getting and how that food is actually processed. So because many times we have the say for example vegetables, but we have no idea that where these vegetables are grown, whether these are the organic vegetables or whether there are lots of pesticides which have been used and so on. So what they wanted to do is that they have this very simple QR code which they put into those vegetables, and then it actually brings you link. It gives you the link to the farmer, and there are some farmers' voices and so on. And what we found is this is a system actually it's very commonly used in Japan as well, and that gives a more customers satisfaction, or customers becomes more how do I say, customer becomes they are more relieved to know, and they have possibly a more attachment to these farmers and how they are actually growing. So these are possible. This is again very simple possible tool for to acknowledge the farmers' efforts, but also to make their market. And this type of product has a relatively higher monetary value, so the farmers actually get a little bit of more higher prices out of this one. So that's possibly the business part of it. But then with this, they get more social recognition for their work. So that's possibly the social innovation part of it.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Sir, my question is what are the challenges on establishing a social entrepreneur startup? Sir?
Yes, there are possibly many challenge for establishing the social entrepreneur startup. Possibly, number one is that we need to always, I always tell to our students also who are doing the startups, new startups, that you possibly need to first understand the market, like who are your main competitors in these. And what value addition or which type of product or which type of functions you are giving, which possibly the other groups are not giving. So understanding your competitor and understanding the market is very important, number one. Number two is that we also, like many times what happens is that we try to solve a problem because we want to just try to solve that problem only, but we possibly don't see it little bit in the longer term. Because many times, okay, if I just only focusing on this particular problem, attempting a specific problem, say for example, and water solutions or the waste and sanitation or waste management and so on. So these are very important issues which we need to solve. But ultimately, when you do an entrepreneurship and a startup, there needs to be certain amount of fund flow, and there needs to be a certain sustainability for that. So how we can, while addressing an immediate social problem, which is the starting point of your social entrepreneurship startup, how to survive a little bit in the longer duration. So okay, I understand that possibly it will be very difficult at the beginning to make a 10 years or 20 years or 30 years vision. But at least a medium term vision that within 5 to 7 years, how the market will change, which type of new technologies may come in addressing that market, and possibly which are the new other solutions which will be competitive solutions which will be available. So the second point would be very important to understand little bit of medium, at least to near, if not a longer term, but at least I will say medium term planning to understand what are the pros and cons of the medium term planning. That's very important. And finally, the third one is, of course, one of the major challenge we find even in our social entrepreneurship startup, which is based in Delhi, that the human resources, like how you keep the good human resources, because you know that this is a very, very competitive market, and people always, they have aspirations, which is not bad. Young people have always aspirations. They want to have a better job opportunities. They want to have a better, possibly different types of packages, which competitive packages, which is offered in the market, which are okay. So possibly how you as a social entrepreneur, startup person, how you actually motivate your colleagues, your staff member, give them a more ownership to be part of that particular movement which you want to do, and make them at least to commit for a, not for lifelong, but at least for a certain period of time, say for example 3 to 5 years commitment. So I will say these 3 points are very, very important: to know your market, competitor, to make a proper medium term planning, and to have good human resources attached to your startup. That's very important. At least I'm sure that there are many more, but from my experience, I can tell like that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, sir. Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, sir. Can green hydrogen is alternative for carbon? If yes, what would be the challenges in developing the green hydrogen, sir?
Can you please repeat once again your question?
Yes, sir. Can green hydrogen is an alternative for carbon? If yes, what would be the challenges in developing the green hydrogen, sir?
Green hydrogen, right?
Yes,
Yes,
right.
oh, that's a very good that you brought this point. I'm very happy to hear about the green hydrogen. Actually, I have a PhD student now. He's a Japanese student, but he is the head of JETRO. JETRO is the Japan External Trade Organization, and he's based in Delhi. And his PhD thesis is very much on this India-Japan hydrogen policy. So he has actually started to understand that. Different types of issues, and Japan has been focusing quite a bit on the green hydrogen, but then India, of course, the India's market is huge, and there are many major companies including Reliance. They are focusing quite a bit on this hydrogen. So I think one of the so far I don't say that I understand this complexity fully. I'm still learning, but so far so far at least what is existing in the different types of analyses is that I think the green hydrogens, the pricing, like the how you make the price available and affordable by the people. Because one is that when you make the green hydrogen, the one of the major challenge becomes uh, the scale, like the scale issue, that unless you have a larger production of that, your price cannot be coming down. So, and unless you bring the price coming down, you cannot actually use it as an alternative energy sources. So far what people are saying that yes, there are technologies available in a smaller scale, but when you actually make this green hydrogen in a larger scale, then there are huge amount of to resolve that hydrogen. You need a huge amount of battery, the larger battery sources, which actually keep it properly. Now, to have that type of battery sources, you really need a very strong and large infrastructure, and to keep that possible. So in a small scale, yes, possibly it is possible, but then to make it in the larger scale, you need one. Number one is the very big infrastructure, and someone needs to actually focus on that infrastructure investment. That's number one. And number two is that unless it's a dilemma, like unless you make this large scale production, the price of the unit cost of that hydrogen cannot be coming down. So how we actually, with the technology, how we actually bring the cost. So one is on the infrastructure investment, and the unit cost, bringing it that unit cost. I think these are the two major challenge so far I am seeing, at least for India. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
My query is how can people get attracted towards social entrepreneurship when there is no high monetary benefit in it?
Again, a very, very important question. Thank you for bringing out. Actually, yes, you are right. Like, say for example, the students who are coming out from big companies, they actually joining a major company, sorry, big university, and then joining with the major company with a major big package. It's a very attractive package. And when you want to do the social entrepreneurship, there are lots of uncertainty, lots of challenge, lots of hard work, lots of refusal at different stages. Like, okay, someone, possibly you are a startup, but someone, there are so many startups now, whether someone will buy your idea or not. So there are many, many different types of challenge. But I think we also need not means, and that's how possibly we don't expect that everyone will make an attempt of making the social entrepreneurship. But by saying that, there are motivation, there are motivated people, there are social challenges, and this is very much, at least to me, it's very much in the value system in that particular person and their mindset, and possibly it is also the value system in some of the universities, like how they are, which type of education they are giving. I just give you one small example. In January, I think in the middle of January, second week of January, I was in India, and I visited Indian Institute of Management (IIM) in Indore. And I was talking to the directors of the IIM Indore, and it was very interesting that I work very closely with several of the other IIM, also IIM Kolkata, IIM Hyderabad, IIM Kozhikode. But this gentleman, that this director of IIM Indore, we had a chat of maybe around 2 hours. Within 2 hours, he never mentioned anything that, oh, my students are getting this much of package from this many of companies. Usually I hear that from the very beginning when someone, IIM director, when they introduce their IIM, that we have this many students, they got this package from Apple, from IBM, and all those type of things. He started telling about the organic vegetable garden which he started in IIM Indore. He told that we have this much kilos of tomatoes, this much of eggplant, and we actually distribute it with the staff members and all this thing. Then he started telling that, okay, you know that when you enter into the gate, and so there are this guard, and they always need to stand. They didn't had enough facility to sit and the toilet and all these things. So as a director, I actually started making toilet and those facilities and all that. So what actually I came to my mind when I was hearing him, that possibly with his leadership, the value education which the institute like IIM, at least for Indore, is giving, is not just the marketing or not just the management principles and so on, but more very basic human oriented value system. So I'm very confident that possibly at least certain percentage, not everyone, at least certain percentage of the students who are getting that value system, they will understand the importance of the social entrepreneurship, because they really want to possibly challenge some of the social issue. They possibly want to really help the people, to learn from the people. He told that he started a community. Earlier, it was a community immersion program, but now he actually changed it to community engagement program. And this is not just making and going to a village and spending some time and coming back, but they have to actually provide some very specific solution for the nearby villages, because they have a few adopted villages around that IIM. So yes, this is possibly not a direct answer to your question, but I think this is a very important thing, that which type of value education we give to our students in our institute. And that will possibly make a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. You have talked about G20 disaster risk reduction. So my question is relating to G20. We have been hearing some allegations that G20 has been organized by developed countries like UN, UK, just to stunt the industrial development of developing countries like India. Is that allegation is true, and what is your opinion regarding that?
Actually, like this is not true that the G20 is organized by any developed or developing country. G20, yes. If you look at the G20's the evolution, it started with the global financial challenge after 2007-8, when we had these Lehman shocks and so on. And it started with mainly, at that time it didn't had the head of state meeting. This was mainly the board of like the bank and the banks governors and the finance ministers meeting. That's how it started, because they wanted to focus only on the financial issues of these 20 countries. But then, as I mentioned also in this global economic forum, World Economic Forum, this global risk outlook, that when you actually look at the financial issues, it's not just the like what is the conversion ratio between $1 is how many rupees, or $1 is how much pound, or $1 is how much yen. It's not just that conversion thing which matters. It's a more complex issue, and there needs to be, as I was also showing in the risk outlook, that we need to tackle with many other issues, which is the development oriented issue, whether it is the climate change, whether it is the disasters, whether it is the biodiversity losses, whether it is the green energy, and so on. And that's how this whole new track, what is called the Sherpa track, which has been created. And there are earlier so far, like say for example, education, then health sector, then climate change, then environmental issues. So these were all focusing on the Sherpa track. But now India government has also added this disaster risk reduction, because in many times the main argument is that like one disaster can actually wash away lots of development issues. Like say for example, you make a school, you make a bridge, then one cyclone comes and washed away the whole bridges or whole school. So all the investment what you have done has already washed away. So again you have to start from zero. And that's how it has been happening. And that's how this whole concept of disaster resilient infrastructure, which again India actually started, the coalition of disaster resilient infrastructure system, they have started. So I think for the developing, it's not only just for the developing, but also for the developed country. And now the so-called developed countries have started understanding the importance of this type of issues, that it is not just the financial issues which matter. We need to think about all these interconnected risk, and that's how I think they are now very open to have lots of new discussions. Even in Japan, in the G20, the disaster track, I was talking to the cabinet office yesterday, our prime minister's office here in Japan, that they have been very much looking forward to contribute, because Japan has also experienced many disasters and trying to do lots of work on the disaster risk reduction.
Any more questions, girls? I think that's all, sir. Thank you for your patience replay, sir. Thank you, friends. Thank you, sir. As I mentioned in the program, IIC Vice President Mrs. Princey is unable to give a vote of thanks as she has to attend a meeting at University of Madras. So I request Ms. Basha, Student Coordinator of EDC, to give away the vote of thanks. and that entrepreneurship development body of Chevalier college. As we all know, the organization of like are the general citizens of close cooperation to express on behalf of the art and on their own behalf, heartfelt thanks for the support and provided by such individuals. I would like to express gratitude and Dr. for the guidance and I have to graduate of Department and Department of Commerce and Dean of Academics for her valuable presentation. And in my gratitude of for their constant support. Now I would like to show my hearty gratitude for our Honorable District Person, Dr. Rajesh Shastra, who share his valuable time from his for knowledge on today we got the unique opportunity to the world's best about social. The thoughts have enlightened our mind and has added value to our current my gratitude to you, sir, for creating our platform. I thank you everyone for the reason of this. I would like to take this opportunity to the participation in this international webinar. I feel particularly grateful to aspect that culture towards social and thank you. I prefer the time.
Sir, thank you so much. That was a simple and very educative session we had today, sir. We hope to continue our association for the benefit of our students, sir, in the future.
Thank you. Thank
sir.
you very much. I also learned a lot from your student questions and very much look forward for our collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, ma'am.